Do you think the greatest fear of medieval people was war, plague, or the witch-burning pyres? Perhaps not. What haunted them every single day was the meal itself. Why were there years when the dining table vanished entirely? Why did grand feasts end with guests vomiting, just so they could keep eating? The answer lies in a dark chapter of the past, one rarely told. And tonight, History for Sleep will lead you into that chapter, slowly, steadily, like a strange lullaby. If you're curious, light up the screen with a like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep the fire of history burning through the long night. You open your eyes, not because you've slept a full 8 hours, but because your stomach has decided to hold a concert. The rumbling sounds like war drums, more melodic than the church choir. You lie there, listening to your belly sing, and you know, welcome to a medieval day, where the stomach is always the unwilling conductor. Outside, the sky is still pitch black. The wind whistles through the cracks of the wooden door like someone sawing a violin with their teeth. Cold air seeps into your blanket, making you curl up, but sleep won't return. Your belly keeps beating its rhythm. In your mind, a sweet dream appears. A steaming bowl of soup, a crusty loaf of bread, a warm cup of tea. Then you open your eyes and see a low, smoky wooden hut, a chipped table, and a hard black loaf that looks no different from a brick in the wall. The dream bursts like a soap bubble, leaving only a reality as solid as stone. You reach for the loaf. It's heavy, not the stuffed with softness kind of heavy, but the convenient concrete block for building a chicken coop kind. You try a bite. Your teeth clack while the bread remains whole. On the second try, you brace yourself. Crack. A shard breaks off like a piece of crumbled brick. You chew, your mouth dries. Your tongue scrapes against mold, sourness, and smoke. Swallowing, your throat catches. Congratulations! You've just eaten an archaeological artifact. Historians still debate, was this truly bread or just an old method of jaw training? Some manuscripts even describe people using stale loaves to sharpen knives. Food or weapon training? Hard to say. You think of drinking water to wash it down, but when you look in the jug, what you see is murky water, shimmering with streaks of green algae, like a failed experiment in a chemistry lab. Drink or not drink? That is the philosophical question. The medieval answer? Drink beer. Not the strong beer you imagine, but beer so thin that after 10 cups, the only effect was more trips to the latrine. And children drank it too. Here you don't ask, why give beer to kids? You ask, what else is clean enough to drink? You take a sip. A faint trace of yeast passes, then fades as quickly as a Lord's promise. But at least it doesn't kill you immediately, and that is enough to be called morning energy. You sigh, looking around the house. Everything is smoke-stained, from clothes, blankets, even the piece of bread in your hand. Smoke is the free seasoning, included in every meal. No need to ask, no need to buy, no need to advertise. You chew the last bite, your stomach still growling. Hunger doesn't fade, it only shifts from shouting to whispering, the kind of irritating whisper like gossiping neighbors outside the gate. You stand up, your feet pressing on the icy wooden floor, the smoke-soaked cloak draped over your shoulders. You glance back at the fire. The embers still glow, the smoke still drifts like wandering spirits. And you know today and every other day you will eat in smoke, breathe in smoke, live in smoke. The motif rings out. Empty stomach, hard bread, thin beer, smoke. A melody that never changes. You smirk, telling yourself, well then, let's just call it breakfast. And you open the door, stepping into the pale morning light, carrying an empty stomach, ready for the next act of your life's tragedy. Eating in darkness, eating in smoke. You sit down in front of the hearth. Modern people may picture a kitchen as a place smelling of sweet pastries, bright with light, where you can take selfies with a hot cup of tea, but a medieval kitchen was no different from a witch's laboratory, with half-burned wood and smoke as the main ingredients. The wooden ceiling above is blackened like a chalkboard scribbled with coal. Smoke refuses to leave, lingering like a shameless guest who stays until dawn. You inhale and immediately feel yourself seasoned with invisible chili pepper. Your eyes water, your throat burns, and you think, so here. The meal begins with the lungs, not the stomach. A pot of soup swings from an iron hook with the wind, creaking like the groan of a dying beast. You scoop a ladle. Through the steam, a few turnips float weakly like pale fish corpses, while scraps of fat drift like oil slicks in puddles after rain. You take a sip. The first taste is not vegetables, nor meat. It is damp ash, a flavor one might only understand today if they licked a dirty grill by mistake. The person beside you sips too. The whole kitchen echoes with a strange orchestra, spoons clinking against the pot, fire crackling, coughs rattling, and now and then the sound of children rubbing teary eyes. If this were background music, it would be the funniest ballad in history. Lead singer, smoke, backup singer, lungs. Some say smoke binds the family together. True enough, the whole household coughs in the same rhythm. Later historians would write, "The hearth was the center of the home where everyone gathered." They forgot to add, "and where everyone cried together from burning eyes." You bite another piece of bread, dipping it into soup to soften it. But soft here only means from floor tile hardness to brick hardness. As your teeth clack in the smoky air, you think, if dentists existed back then, they surely would have become the new nobility, for with just one pair of pliers, they could grow rich for life. The smoke thickens, tangling in your hair, seeping into your clothes, clinging to your skin. Even when you leave the kitchen, the smell of smoke follows you like a faithful spirit, and when you exhale, your breath carries smoke, as if you've signed a free advertisement contract for burning wood. You look at the children. They still eat, chewing quietly, swallowing with difficulty, eyes red but mouths smiling. Because to them, the mere presence of food, no matter the taste, is already joy. One softly says, "Delicious." You can't tell if it's true or if they're just trying to comfort themselves. In the smoky haze, even truth stings the eyes. You sigh, your stomach is still not full, but your lungs are already full of smoke. You stand, trying to see through the fog for the way out. Outside, the sun is rising, a faint light guiding the path. You know noon will be no better. Still hard bread, still cracked cheese, still pungent onions. The only difference is, you will eat outside, under sunlight instead of in smoke. You open the door, stepping out. Behind you, the hearth still burns, the smoke still rises, the soup still bubbles. You inhale the air of the field, not necessarily clean, but at least it doesn't make you cry. And you prepare for the next act of culinary tragedy, the peasant's lunch, eating quickly, to plow. Noon arrives not because the sun shines, but because your stomach growls louder than the church bell. Since morning, you've harvested non-stop, your back sore, hands raw, sweat running down in streams. The ground beneath is muddy, the grain is collapsing, while your stomach keeps standing tall in protest. You stop, sitting on the edge of the field. The finest chair you have is a sharp rock by the ridge, just sharp enough to keep your backside aching, reminding you you're living in the Middle Ages. You open the cloth bag you brought from morning. Inside, a piece of black bread hardened by 2 hours of sun, a raw onion, and a small chunk of cheese, so small that even a mouse would laugh at its stinginess. You bite the bread. The crack sounds like snapping dry wood. Your teeth tremble, your throat parches. You peel the onion. The pungent smell stings your eyes more than kitchen smoke. You try a combination, a piece of bread, a slice of onion, a bit of cheese hard as pebbles. That mixture spreads in your mouth and you realize, this is not lunch, but a durability test for the digestive system. Historians later wrote that peasants ate simply. True, so simple that the menu had only 3 flavors: the dryness of bread, the sharpness of onion, and the toothache of cheese. If Michelin came to rate, they'd probably give 3 slaps instead of stars. Around you, fellow workers open their cloth bags. The scene is identical, people scattered across the field, chewing dryly, squinting in the sun, mouths burning with onion. No one speaks much. The sound of dry chewing rises together, like a herd of goats gnawing hay. If there were background music, it would be rap mixed with the beat of empty stomachs. You drink a sip of weak beer from your leather flask. The faint yeast slips down, not enough to fill, but enough to make your mind blur. Modern people drink beer for pleasure. You drink to forget you're chewing raw onion. A drop of sweat falls on the bread in your hand. You watch it soak in, then swallow the piece. To your surprise, the salty taste of sweat makes the bread much better. You smile, thinking, perhaps this is my first culinary invention. fresh sweat-flavored bread. The wind sweeps across the field, carrying with it the growls of your fellow workers' stomachs. No one is surprised, for it is the usual sound. In fact, complete silence would be scarier. At least the growling proves it is still working, has not abandoned you yet. You chew the last piece of cheese, your teeth crunching, and you feel proud. You have just defeated a stone with your jaw. But that pride lasts only a minute. Then your stomach growls again as if to remind you, I am not full. What you just ate was only the appetizer of despair. Historians write about productivity, harvests, the yield of barley, but none record that a peasant's lunch lasted less than 10 minutes, and afterward the stomach remained empty as if nothing had been eaten. History prefers tales of war and kings. It rarely tells that in the fields, millions of empty stomachs protested together each day. You stand, grip the sickle, and return to work. The sun beats down, your back burns, your belly rumbles again. Everything repeats. Reap, bend, chew, drink, stomach growl. A vicious cycle stretching across a lifetime. Elsewhere in the castle, there are lavish feasts, roasted meats dripping with fat, spices rich and fragrant. But to you, they are only rumors. Your table is the edge of the field, your plate is your hand, and your seasoning is hunger. You chuckle softly. Here, lunch is not for satisfaction, but as a reminder. Hunger always sits at the table, eats with you, and always eats more than you. You reap another stroke, sweat dripping onto the field. Your stomach drums again, but this time the sound is deeper, louder, as if hunger is rehearsing to be the lead singer of your life. And you know the next chapter of this story is not about food, but hunger itself, the true seasoning of the Middle Ages. You stand in the field, sickle in hand, back drenched in sweat. The lunch just passed was nothing but a joke. A dry loaf, a pungent onion, a crumb of cheese the size of a fingernail. Yet lying down on the ridge for a few minutes, your stomach already growls again, like a grumpy neighbor knocking at midnight. I am still not satisfied. Hunger in the Middle Ages does not come and go. It comes, pitches a tent, and stays. It does not sit at the end of the table, it sits at the head, eats before you, and never gives anything back. Even if your belly is filled for a brief moment, soon it is empty again, as if everything you ate had turned into dust. The sounds from the stomach are truly impressive. At times it gurgles like an underground stream. At others it blares like a torn trumpet. Sometimes it thunders like war drums. If there had been a music industry back then, surely the belly would have been invited as a folk instrument. A communal orchestra, rising from millions of empty stomachs, enough to drown out the church bells. Later historians debated, did hunger make peasants weaker, or did it turn them into super durable beings? Some records say, peasants worked 12 hours with only bread and thin beer. Admirable on paper, but in reality it was like praising a machine that runs on nearly dead batteries. The chronicler, sitting at his wooden desk, quill dipped in ink, probably with a full stomach, forgot to note, hunger never takes a shift off. You bite your lip. Hunger does have a smell. It is the sour sweat staining coarse cloth, the stench of a dry mouth, and the imagined aroma of meals you will never have. Hunger has a sound, the belly growling, the guts twisting, even the whistle of wind through the emptiness inside. Hunger has a taste, a bitter metallic tang on your tongue, mixed with the sharpness of this noon's onion still lingering. And strangely, hunger even has a vision. You see illusions of white bread, thick soup, golden roasted meat. You know it is not real, but your stomach still claps in applause. You drink another sip of weak beer. It slips down, not enough to fill, but enough to quiet hunger for a moment. Like handing a lollipop to a screaming child. It solves nothing, but at least it silences them. You smirk. Here, the faint yeast is the art of deceiving the belly. Your fellow workers are the same. They eat little, drink little, then keep plowing. No one says full, none dares to dream of enough. Their vocabulary holds only still hungry and very hungry. So if someone asks what the main flavor of the Middle Ages was, the answer is not roast meat nor bean porridge, but hunger. You lean on your sickle, looking up at the sky. The sun hangs lazily, unhurried, while your stomach rushes to beat its rhythm. Each time you think, maybe I've eaten enough, the belly replies. Ha, keep dreaming. It is like a brutally honest friend always saying to your face, you have nothing. You chuckle again. So hunger is the secret chef. It makes hard bread taste better, salty cheese easier to chew, thin beer sweeter. Without hunger, perhaps no one could swallow those foods. And so, though you hate it, you must admit, hunger seasoned every meal. But hunger is not fair. In the fields, it clings to you like a shadow. In the cold stone castles, hunger waits outside the door. Nobles know nothing of growling stomachs, nothing of raw onions. They know roast meats, exotic spices, goblets of wine. For them, meals are a stage for display, not a contract of survival. You reap another stroke, hear your stomach roar, and in that sound you imagine music echoing from the distant castle. Not the music of hunger, but of excess. In one place, people gnaw dry onions. In another, people vomit just to keep eating. The medieval world was split in two, those who were full to flaunt and those who were hungry to live. You know, the next chapter of this life will take you to the long candlelit table where roasted meat and spices overflow. Not because you are invited, but because we must see to witness the terrifying contrast between two dining tables. While you in the field chew raw onion until tears fall like you've watched a Greek tragedy, in the castle, a lavish feast is beginning. And make no mistake, this is not eating. This is a fashion show, with models being roast chickens, suckling pigs, and spice-stuffed swans. You imagine stepping into the banquet hall. Candles flicker brightly, casting wild shadows on the cold stone walls. A long table draped in white cloth is lined with dishes that the villagers outside only hear of through rumors. The suckling pig glistens with fat as if fresh from a spa exfoliation. The roasted peacock spreads golden wings like an illustration from a myth. And the swan, yes, the swan, stuffed with spices and redressed in snowy white feathers, looks from afar like a tragic artwork. I just flew upward, only to be stuffed with cinnamon and cloves. The smell of grease rises thick, enough to oil squeaky hinges. Spices spread out, cinnamon, anise, cloves, pepper, all so costly that each sneeze seems to fling away a gold coin. The air is dense, fatty, suffocating, as if the whole room were wrapped in lard. Guests sit around the table, eating little, talking much. Knives crack the crispy skin with a sound like shattering glass, fat splatters, and laughter erupts. Not because it tastes good, but because the sound effects are entertaining. Here, food is only a prop. Eating is not for fullness, but for display. If out in the fields the hungry stomach is the lead singer, in the castle, the noble ego is the star performer. Later historians wrote, the banquet of nobles was proof of prosperity, but on closer look it resembled a contest of showing off. Who hired the better cook, who imported more spices, who presented the most shocking dish. At some feasts, they brought out a roast pig stuffed with a roast goose stuffed with a pigeon stuffed with eggs, the medieval version of an edible matryoshka. Sounds tempting, but in reality, it looked like a grotesque unboxing game. You try an imaginary bite of roasted meat. So fatty your tongue slips, like licking a melting candle. Swallowing, your belly swells, but your soul feels hollow. Here, fullness is not a reward, but a punishment. Some even force themselves to vomit just to return to the table. An infinite buffet only the idlest, most bored-to-death minds could invent. Wine is poured into goblets, dark red like blood, burning hot down the throat. Nobles clink glasses, laugh boisterously, then stagger, no different from schoolboys skipping class, except instead of street snacks, they have roasted swans. Their laughter echoes through the stone hall, mingling with clattering plates and knives, a symphony of chaos. The servants scurry, carrying trays so heavy their backs could break. They know they will never taste, only inhale, and sometimes catch a splash of fat on their faces. That is the highest blessing they can expect. You look around and see the contrast too clearly. Outside, the whole village shares an onion. Inside, a peacock is used as decoration. If a villager peeked through the door's crack, they would surely believe this was a sacrificial ritual, not dinner. And when the church bells ring, even those wallowing in fat must bow their heads. Tomorrow, the church will remind them that not every day may be eaten like a king. Some days even a purse full of gold is useless, for the table may hold only fish, thin porridge, and prayer. After a night of noble feasting in Greece, the next morning church bells toll. And as the sound lingers, not only your soul, but also your stomach is ordered by the church. Today you do not eat meat. Today you eat fish. Fasting day is no personal choice, no vegetarian for health or luxurious detox. It is a command from God, passed through the mouths of priests. You might dodge taxes, avoid labor duties, but you cannot escape the church's menu. On this day, your stomach belongs to the faith. You sit before the table. The cloth is still white. The candles still burn. But instead of the aroma of roasted meat, the air is filled with salted fish. The dried fish, stiff as a sun-cracked sandal, is placed solemnly on the plate. Add to it some thin porridge, boiled beans, boiled greens, all flavors circling one theme: blandness. You bite into the fish, salty to the point of burning, tough as rope. You try to swallow, your throat stings, your lips parch. You take a sip of thin beer, hoping it slides down, but no. The beer only helps the salt spread wider. Your stomach roars, this time not from hunger, but from anger. Is this a meal or a punishment? Later historians wrote, fasting purifies the soul. Purifies what, they did not say, but surely it purifies the taste buds. For after several fasting days, you will no longer remember what meat smells like. Some accounts tell, to mask the stench of rotten fish, they mixed in costly spices. The result? The dining table became a game of guess which smell is worse. Not only peasants endured, nobles too had to bow. Yesterday they flaunted spice-stuffed swans. Today they force a smile at dried fish. But of course, they had their secret weapon, strong wine. If you can't swallow, drink until drunk, so the fish goes down with your faith. In the church, the priest preaches, eat this way so the soul may be cleansed. But your stomach does not listen. It screams like a child forced to take medicine. Each spoonful of watery oatmeal, each bland bean is a test of patience. And you realize, on fasting days, you do not eat to live, you eat to prove loyalty. The sounds around the table form a tragic orchestra. Spoons stirring thin porridge, teeth grinding salted fish, sighs escaping. Sometimes coughs break in, not from smoke this time, but from throats scorched by salt. If this is a festival, its theme is surely ascetic cuisine. You sit there sipping porridge, watching others' eyes. No one says delicious. The word seems erased from the dictionary. Adults swallow, children whimper, and your belly keeps rioting. It is a rare equality. On fasting day, all suffer the same. You ponder. The church may not control harvests, may not control hunger, but it controls meals. And that is the supreme power, forcing you to swallow what you do not want in the name of soul. Truly, if the soul had taste buds, it would have fled long ago. You take another bite of fish. The stench crawls in, smothering the smoke still lingering from the morning. And you understand. Your belly is not freed at all. It merely shifts from one misery to another. You lift your eyes to the crucifix on the wall, thinking, forgive me, for I dared to hope food could taste good. The meal ends. You are not full, not satisfied, only aware that you have completed your duty. Your soul, according to the priest, is now lighter, but your stomach feels heavy, parched, and full of salted fish. You rise, your head spinning, not from holiness, but from dehydration. And as you glance at the small medicine shelf in the kitchen corner, you suddenly think, perhaps the next meal will not make you full, but instead, make you healthier, at least by the beliefs of that time. You already know breakfast is bread like brick, lunch is onion that stings the eyes, dinner is salted fish from the church, but some days your stomach becomes a reluctant patient. For in the Middle Ages, people did not clearly distinguish food from medicine. A meal could be the prescription, and the prescription was often called a meal. Before you is a bowl of herbal vegetable soup, not the refreshing kind you imagine, but a dark green-black liquid, reeking sharply like shoe water. They say, this cools the liver, refreshes the blood. You sip, the first taste, bitter, the second, still bitter, the third, so bitter you begin to miss, the onion from noon. Historians still debate. Did people truly believe herbs cured illness, or were they only consoling themselves when nothing else was available? But as you chew the bitter mugwort, your tongue goes numb, your throat dries, and you realize, this is not a meal, this is a test to see if you still want to live. You recall nobles once drank wine mixed with gold dust for immortality. The result was early death, but at least a luxurious one. The poor had no gold, They had herbs, coriander seeds, sage leaves, dried celery roots. Swallowing, your mouth reeks as if you've sucked on an entire medicine cabinet. You bite cheese sprinkled with herbs. From outside, it looks appealing with a strange aroma, but biting down, the sharp herb overpowers the milk, making you feel like chewing a bandage soaked in floor cleaner. You swallow, your belly twists, and the person beside you nods. It's working. Yes, it works, mainly by making you want to stop eating immediately. You take a sip of herbal tea, advertised as pure water, but as it goes down, your throat burns, your stomach churns. If there is a heaven for herb lovers, it must be a garden of bitter leaves where people sit chewing and pretend to be happy. The atmosphere around the table resembles a community clinic. Each person eats a different dish, each with a reason. This cures cough. That wards off evil. This is good for black bile. But the shared outcome is the same. The belly stays hungry. You look at them, then at your soup and think, if illness does not kill me, this bitterness will. Historians loved listing hundreds of herbs in medical texts. Mugwort, rosemary, dill, sage. They wrote passionately about their healing properties, but they never wrote about the actual taste, perhaps because if they did, the pharmacopoeia would read like horror fiction. You set down the spoon, sighing. Your stomach still growls, but your mouth is coated in bitterness. You feel as though you've undergone an extreme detox course, except without the luxury spa, only a smoky kitchen. The person beside you smiles. Bitter means it's good. You look at them, wanting to ask, good for who? For me or for the sickness? And then you hear soft laughter. You turn and see the children. They care nothing for herbs, for humors, for cures. Their eyes are fixed on a small cake, dusted with a touch of rare honey. They giggle, breaking it apart to share. In this bitter world, only they could find sweetness. You glance at the kitchen corner. There, a few children sit cross-legged, eyes shining like candles, not from the fire, but from the sight of a small cake. Not even worthy of being called dessert today, just flour mixed with honey, baked to a charred edge, dry enough to be used as chalk. But to the children, it is treasure hidden in a chest of gold. You break the cake into 4 pieces. The crack resounds like snapping dry wood, crumbs scatter, and the children giggle as if heaven itself had performed a miracle. One holds a piece no bigger than a finger, bites slowly, teeth clicking on the hardness, but still shuts their eyes and smiles, as though swallowing paradise. Compared to the bitter herbal soup, this sweet crumb is like a pop song interrupting a funeral dirge. The fleeting honey clings to the tongue, and suddenly the smoky kitchen feels more breathable. You taste a crumb, sharp sweet, burnt at the edge, yet strangely you smile too. In a world of bitterness and salt, a touch of sweetness is enough to become medicine. Historians rarely wrote of such moments. They preferred famine, failed harvests, rising grain prices. They forgot the laughter of a child licking their fingers to catch leftover sugar. Perhaps because adults believe such joy too small to record. But it is those small things that kept people from losing their minds. You watch the children. One tries to hold the cake in their mouth as long as possible, clamping down as if afraid it might vanish. Another crumbles it, picking tiny bits to savor, laughing as they go. This eat slowly to stretch happiness strategy looks no different from a survival skill. Adults measure harvest yields, children measure seconds of joy. You chuckle softly. Perhaps while adults see food as survival, children truly understand it as joy. Even if that joy is so rare it comes only once a year. During festivals, they chase after processions, hoping to snatch crumbs fallen from noble feasts. A shard of almond candy could make them the happiest children in Europe. Happiness here is cheap, and yet infinitely costly. You glance aside, spotting one child scraping honey from the wooden table with a finger, licking it clean. Eyes squint, mouth sticky with sugar, he looks like a little king celebrating victory. You think, if someone could bottle this moment, they would be richer than any lord. In the smoky kitchen, that laughter rings pure, drowning out stomach growls, drowning out the howling wind outside. Brief, but powerful. Like a shaft of light piercing through a church's dark door. You feel yourself soften, too. For a few minutes at least, you forget hard bread, salted fish, bitter herbs. You think only of children's laughter. But then, as the last crumb melts in their mouths, the laughter fades. The children lick their lips, glance at each other, their eyes still bright, but their stomachs begin drumming the familiar rhythm again. Joy, like sugar, only fools the belly for a moment. After that, reality returns. Smoke, hunger, and exhaustion. You sit, listening as laughter turns into sighs. And you know, these children, sooner or later, will grow up and learn to chew onions, gnaw hard cheese, sip thin porridge like their parents. But at least right now, they have a sweet memory to hold on to. You close your eyes, thinking of the days to come. The harvest may fail, the granaries may empty, and then even crumbs will vanish. The table will turn bare, and then the laughter of children will be silenced, replaced by a colder sound, the screams of famine. There are days you open your cloth bag and find nothing. Not stale bread, not cheese, not onion, only emptiness, like a cruel joke. And you realize today's meal is not burnt, not smoked, not oversalted, it simply does not exist. In the village, the table that was already poor now sits bare. People gather around the old wooden board, with no plates, no pots, only eyes looking at each other, bellies rumbling as speech. If anyone were to name the main dish, it would be family-style boiled air. You try to smell something, the scent of dry grass, damp earth, fog. No soup, no bread, no fish, only emptiness. People begin to pick weeds, boil roots, cook bark in water. Some chronicles say that in certain years, villagers mixed moss with sawdust to bake bread. Eating it, the belly growled not from hunger, but in protest. Is this food or furniture? Historians record failed harvests, spreading famine, numbers of the dead. But they rarely describe in detail the scene of a family staring at boiling water, hoping for a miracle that meat or vegetables would appear. If anyone did write, it must have been a poet, for only poetry dares to dream so. You glance at the neighbor. One gnaws bark, teeth chipping, but still swallowing. Another drops pebbles into boiling water, calling it stone soup, at least something to stir. The children are gaunt, eyes sunken, no longer laughing at the sight of bread. Hunger has turned joy into a luxury. The sound in the village is strange. No chopping knives, no spoons against pots. Instead, collective stomachs roar, children cry, adults groan. A background score no one wants to hear, yet no one can turn off. You too drink water, hoping to ease the emptiness. But water only pushes hunger deeper, then back stronger. Some drink until their bellies bloat, collapse, still starving. Water cannot fool the stomach, it only turns hunger into waves crashing inside. Some, in desperation, eat the seeds meant for next season, and thus today's hunger is answered by ensuring tomorrow's will be worse, a vicious cycle with no escape. The old give up their share for the young, but the result is only that both waste away. A mother splits a piece of bark, telling herself, "At least my child has something to chew." The child swallows, then cries, for they know what is called food is nothing but a cruel trick. You sit there, hearing your belly roar, hearing the neighbor's belly roar, and realize, in famine the whole village becomes a tragic orchestra. No one full, no one enough, no one spared. All together chewing emptiness, all together swallowing despair. Historians may write, that year, famine killed this many. But they do not write of the feeling of sitting at an empty table, still laying hands on the wood as if in prayer, knowing no miracle will come. They do not write of the heavy silence of a meal without food, yet that is the true tragedy. You sigh, your belly twisting, your mind spinning. You know, when food disappears, when the table holds only bare wood, death will begin to sit with you. And in the Middle Ages, death does not knock. It pulls up a chair calmly, like family. You once thought the table was for family gatherings, for sharing bread and soup. But when famine sweeps through, the table is no longer for food. It becomes the place where another guest sits down, placing bony hands on the wood, smiling without lips. Death uninvited, yet always arriving. You look around, seeing the family sit in silence. On the table, no plates, no spoons, only hollow eyes, frail arms. A child slumps onto their arm, wheezing. An elder leans back, eyes shut. No one speaks, for all hear their bellies loud enough. And mingled in, you almost hear soft laughter, not from humans, but from the guest itself. You inhale, catching the must of wood, the earth on clothes, the smell of unwashed bodies too weak to bathe, no scent of food, no scent of fire, only emptiness, only waiting. If aromas can die, this is the funeral of flavor. Later historians wrote of famine in numbers, villages erased, bodies left by the roads. But they rarely wrote that death did not arrive with swords and spears, but slowly, with each ladle of porridge gone, each loaf of bread vanished. It sat down at the table, quietly eating the share you never had. You look at your hands, thin, veins protruding. You place them on the table, beside the empty space where a bowl should be, and you imagine another skeletal hand beside yours. No one sees it, but you know it is there. Truly, death is the most polite guest. It does not steal, it only waits its turn. Someone in the village collapses. There is no loud mourning, only a chair pulled back, left empty. Then the next day, another chair. The room is not noisy, only quieter, wider, colder. And each time a chair is empty, death sits there, leisurely as if enjoying an endless dinner. You remember the rare days when children had sweet cakes, the giggles as they broke crumbs. Now no more. The children lie still, eyes dull, too weak to laugh. Death has taken the last dessert of this world, their smiles. You swallow dry, your throat parched, your belly twisting. Yet strangely, you feel no anger, you feel tired, you feel accustomed. In the Middle Ages, hunger was not just a condition, it was the foundation. And death was not an enemy, but a companion, the one who sat beside you for years, now only changing its greeting. If any sound describes this meal, it is silence. No knives, no spoons, no chewing, only faint breaths, the creak of chairs, and somewhere, wind slipping through the cracks, like an endless prayer. You close your eyes. Before you, the dining table becomes an altar. The chairs become places for spirits to gather, and you realize, in the place where food vanishes, death becomes the main course. People do not eat to live anymore, but live only to wait until they sit with the final guest. Historians will continue to argue about the causes of famine, climate, war, taxes. But to you, the reason matters little. What matters is that you once sat at this table, waiting, swallowing saliva in place of food, and watched death pull up a chair beside you. You open your eyes, the table is still empty, the darkness still covers all, and you understand, the meal has ended. Not because anyone is full, but because there is no one left to eat. So you have walked with me through a long journey, from brick-hard bread to smoky soup stinging the eyes, to the greasy feasts of nobles, the bland fasting days, the fleeting sweetness of children, until the dining table itself vanished, leaving only a chair for death to sit as the final guest. Medieval food, in the end, was not meant to fill, nor to please. It was only a reminder. Humanity once survived on anything, from crumbs of bread to illusions, and sometimes hunger itself was the most enduring seasoning of history. If you are still awake by now, perhaps your belly too has growled along. But instead of searching for black bread in the fridge, let this story drift away like a strange dream, a lullaby from the past. This is the spirit of history for sleep, not told with war drums, but with slow, steady breaths to let you sink into calm. And if you wish to continue such strange journeys, greasy feasts, empty tables, or stories that have slept for centuries, remember to like, share, and subscribe. That is how you light another small candle so we may keep telling, keep singing, keep the past flickering in gentle darkness. Sleep well, and don't worry, tonight your belly will not wake you with war drums as it did in the Middle Ages.